Hello, everyone, and welcome to Righting Wrongs on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. My name is Bill Myers, and I have the privilege today to be talking with Scott Turow. Mr. Turow's books have been translated into 40 languages and have sold over 30 million copies worldwide. He's been described as the gold standard of literary legal fiction, literary legal thrillers. Scott, welcome to the show.
Bill, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. I noticed that you're much better dressed than I am, which probably has to do with the fact that I've retired from the practice of law and you haven't. So
yes, that's exactly right. I was going to ask you that. Now that you're retired, are you writing full time?
I'm definitely writing full time, and I still have a couple of pro bono cases that, as one knows about the law, cases linger, a little like COVID, and so I still have two cases that are with me, but most of my time now goes to writing, and remarkably, the books seem to come faster now. So
I guess they do. I hope you're having a chance to travel too and getting to see your grandkids and all that stuff.
Yeah, the grandchildren thing, it has been nice to resume. And actually, I have a trip tomorrow. Leisure travel is we've done some, but probably less than we used to. And I think, and one of the reasons for that, which you undoubtedly know from your own experience, is that it's such a pain in the butt to fly right now.
Oh, yeah.
The crowds and the delays, and and you get on every flight without any sense that you're actually going to leave. So
I've experienced that as well, unfortunately for everybody, but it is what it is, and you deal with it, right? So in addition to readers, we have writers who are going to be seeing this, and I have you as a captive audience. So for a couple minutes, I just want to ask you a couple things.
Sure.
About writing. When you're writing a protagonist, how do you approach it, and what do you think makes for a good protagonist?
That's a question that very often people ask questions I've heard before. That is not one that I've heard. So my compliments to you. And I think, Bill, the simple answer is that a good protagonist is somebody who feels like she can withstand the weight of a book. And that means that whatever conflicts I sense in the protagonist's character are, big enough that they deserve the hundreds of pages that they're going to get. Mrs. Dalloway is a remarkable book, but I couldn't have written it because that woman's not super interesting. So Pinky, in Suspect, is somebody who's got a lot going on at the center of her, and that's the real requirement, that whoever it is, for me, has to have somebody who's got some stuff to work out.
Yeah, and Pinky does have a lot of stuff to work out, and I want to talk about her. When I read Suspect, she pretty much jumped off the page. Actually, when I read the last book, The Last Trial, Pinky jumped off the page, even though she was a secondary character. She was Sandy Stern's granddaughter, and seemed to me to be exactly the opposite of Sandy.
Correct.
He's staid, he's reserved, and she's like an explosion in a candy factory.
Right. So
Did you,
he's thoughtful, she's instinctive. So
yes. Did you design her to be that way, or as sometimes happens with authors writing characters, did you just give her a name and she asserted herself and said, hey, this is who I am?
yeah, no, you know, every novelist has the experience of encountering the character who runs away with the book. And for me, I know a book's going well when that character shows her or his face. And just to define terms for your listeners, that's the character who defies expectations, demands more space and more time on the page than the author in, you know, designing the book thought that character was going to get. So, you know, and Pinky was certainly that kind of character in the last trial. And, you know, what you just said, that she's the opposite of Sandy, is not something that ever actually occurred to me, although you're clearly right. And they are polar opposites, and and very strangely adore one another.
Right.
So, which is probably not something that you might expect, except in a family situation.
Mhm. We'll talk about the plot of the book in a few minutes, but tell the viewers a little bit about Pinky, about her backstory, her history, and her personality.
Sure. So Clarice Pinky Granum, I could be a wise guy and say she made her first appearance in The Burden of Proof when her mother, you know, in that novel published in 1990, announces that she's pregnant, and the person she's pregnant with is Pinky, who, you know, grows up to be, for no obvious reason, grows up to be a really troubled kid. She ultimately explains in the course of the novel what she thinks was wrong in her upbringing, and she has a pretty coherent answer. But you know, she gets into trouble. Her grandfather, a renowned criminal lawyer, is frequently bailing her out, literally, which is
Right.
part of their bond. She's a great athlete, had hopes of being an Olympic snowboarder, broke her back on a jump, and became a lost soul after that. Too many painkillers led to too much drug use, frequently arrested, and ultimately got the idea that she wanted to be a cop because she thought she could do it better than the people who'd harassed her, and ended up flunking out of the academy in the last week because, long story, she failed a drug test. And she's drifted after that. As she says, she feels like she missed the chance to be herself because she thought she had a talent for police work. Worked eventually for her grandfather and aunt in their law firm as a kind of paralegal, but displayed talent as an investigator. And when the grandfather and aunt retired, Pinky became an investigator attached to the law office of another relative, Rick Dudek. And that's where we find her, as an investigator in Rick's office.
Yeah, and she does not play by the rules.
No.
And I think that she takes great pleasure in the fact that she doesn't play by the rules. She also has, I mean, for someone who's gone through so much, she has a remarkable insight to both her own strengths and her own flaws. Like, she openly acknowledges, this is what's different about me that's good, and this is what's different about me that's bad.
Right, right.
What do you think, Scott? What do you think she wants most in the world? If she could have one thing, what would it be?
I think it pretty clearly, Bill, is self-acceptance, because she's still, I mean, Pinky is, by her own admission, a weird person. And just to clue your audience, one sign of this is the fact that she wears a old piece of goth jewelry that makes it look like she's got a common nail through her nose. So she's not trying to tell the world that she's, the girl next door. And, she knows this about herself. I think accepting the fact that you're not just a little bit unique, but really different from the person that most other people in the world want to be, comes with a lot of conflict and pain. And that's really at the center of what's going on with Pinky. And, and that's part of the struggle that I referred to before when I said, what is it that can sustain, when you asked, what is it about a protagonist that can sustain a book?
Yeah, she, at one point in the book, she tells one of the other characters, "You've never met anyone like me."
Right.
And
right.
boy, is that true. That
right.
is
She's
true.
She's proud of that.
Yeah.
She's proud of that, but she knows, and she's talking to a lover by then, she's proud in the sense that she thinks that will be interesting to the person she's talking to. And that's good, but if you really peer down through the surface, she also would think that's the doom of the relationship, that she's not like anybody else.
Yeah. So let's talk about the book itself. The premise of the book is that the chief of police, who's a woman, Lucia Gomez Barrera, is, she's made her way in this man's world. She's become chief of police. And all of a sudden she is accused of sextortion, demanding sex for promotion by 3 separate men.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about Chief Gomez.
Well, you've done a great job of summarizing her yourself, but Lucy Gomez is somebody who became a cop after she got out of the Army, just because there was a veteran's preference, and found that she really liked the job. And started on the street across the river in the big city that of Kendall County, and eventually moved out to the working class suburb of Highland Isle. Did very well on that police force, is not shy about saying that being a female helped at times. Most of the time, of course, it was a hindrance. But she rose through the force, and without contaminating herself in what was a sometimes dirty department. And when a reform mayor was elected, Lucy became the logical candidate to lead the department. She grew up in that town. She was a great cop. She'd gone to night school. She had advanced degrees. So she came in, and until this moment, when 3 men suddenly say she's been shaking us down for sex, she'd been doing really well.
Yeah, and I thought that was a very interesting twist on the traditional male-female power dynamics in the workplace. This is men accusing her of this.
Right.
And as a reader, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And she's asked about it, and of course she didn't. And I think she says something like, well,
yeah.
And well,
yeah. Her lawyer Rick says, well, we're going to eventually put on the defense, and we'll say it's bull pucky that you ever had sex with these guys. And she's like, well, wait a minute, we'll talk about that later. So it's complicated, and it's both, I think, appropriate but somewhat amusing that the law's got its hard categories, and it says if somebody does this, it's wrong. And yet everybody from the beginning, starting with Pinky, says, well, wait a minute, it's different when it's a woman. And she says to Rick, Pinky says to Rick, well, I don't understand, how'd she force him They're all bigger than her and they're all carrying a 38. So how did she force them? And,
Right.
you know, it's not a question you necessarily ask when gender roles are reversed.
Exactly. And what you do learn is that it is very complicated. It's not black and white. There is a dark force out there trying to get her. And the villain in the book is Moritz Wojciech, also known as the Ritz. Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about the Ritz?
Well, the Ritz, and I have to say he arises a little bit from my own experience. But the Ritz is like a lot of police officers, whatever the stereotype, is super smart and really, could be a professor somewhere if that was the path he had chosen. Probably if his father weren't a cop, he might have gone that way. But his father was a dirty cop, and like father, like son. And he takes great satisfaction out of thinking he's the smartest guy in the room. Often he is. He arranged his life on the police force so that he could engage in various schemes, basically shaking down drug dealers. And as he's become a private person, he's done very, very well, but the leopard doesn't change his spots.
Right.
And Lucy says, if I had to bet, Ritz is still a drug dealer.
Yeah, he is. You describe him, and I love the way you describe him, flat out born bad, who lives to be wicked.
Right.
He is just a bad guy. He wants to be a bad guy. He loves being a bad guy. And, we find out that he and Chief Gomez have a history. And without getting into it, there's a very interesting power dynamic that happens between them. One is up, one is down, one is up, one is down.
Right.
And it's really interesting the way that it unfolds. And you don't really learn until the end how it unfolds.
Right.
Now Pinky gets involved with a guy across the hall who's very shady, very suspect. He's up to something. Tell us a little bit about him. She calls him Two for
Right.
The weird one.
The weird one. Well, this man moves in next door to her only 3 or 4 weeks before the action in the novel commences. And as far as Pinky's concerned, he's not your normal next door neighbor. He really has no interest in saying hello to her or anybody else who lives in the building, seemingly. He never even cleans out the mailbox from the prior tenant and just walks through whatever the postal carrier leaves underneath his mailbox in the foyer of the old building where they live. And Pinky, being a natural snoop, tries to immediately begins eavesdropping on him and hears nothing from next door after a couple of television shows early on. She doesn't even hear the keys clicking on his computer terminal. And so she begins starting with different fantasies about him. He must be somebody in witness protection. He must be a hitman. He seems to have a regular routine, but she has no clue what he's doing. She's incredibly curious about him. As Rick, her boss, as Pinky begins to talk about him, says, well, what does he look like? And Pinky describes him, and Rick says, well, he sounds kind of hot. And is that what this is about? And she goes, no. But Pinky is transparent and is interested in both men and women, but she has her tastes, and apparently this man fits them.
Yeah, and you get the sense as this thing unfolds between the two of him, it's a butterfly and a fire situation. But as the thing unfolds, you're not sure who's the butterfly and who's the fire, because she can be dangerous herself.
No question. And I can't, without engaging in a spoiler or two,
Right.
explain the full dimension of the relationship. But I may be saying too much, but when I was a boy, I remember reading a story in Playboy where it was an era where people used androids in order to have sex. And ultimately the send up in this particular story, I don't remember who wrote it, was that each of the main characters had sent their android out to have sex with the other person's android instead of doing it themselves. And
Okay.
the androids were having a high old time. And that is there's echoes of that in Pinky's relationship with her next door neighbor, Coob.
Yeah. One of the things that, as I read the book, the way Pinky talks, I mean, she doesn't talk like you and I, men of a certain age, lawyers, ex-lawyers. She has a very distinctive voice.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of a challenge that was for you to create this character and have her talk and have the voice sound so real and so convincing, because it really was. I mean, I didn't hear an older man talking through a younger woman. I heard this young, wild woman talking, and it was all very, very natural to me.
There's certain miracles in writing. And so as I approached writing Suspect with my editor, Ben Sevier, I had no idea that I was going to try to write in the first person, because, Pinky's social experience and mine are pretty distant. She's 40 years younger than I am, just to start. And but as soon as I started writing, I was writing in her voice, and it felt generally really natural to me. And that doesn't mean that there weren't a few clinkers here and there that were pointed out to me by either the editors or advanced readers. But generally speaking, I just heard her. And so I sent Ben the first chapter written in the third person and written in the first person. And because he was a little disbelieving when I said, I want to try this in first person.
Right.
And he wrote back and said, well, the first chapter sounds pretty good. Why don't you write the book? And if we have to delay it while you rewrite in the third person, we'll delay it. But, I'm kind of with your instinct on this. So, and it's, it's like the character who runs off with the book. Something happens. And, I just had a feeling for this character to begin with, what she was about, and I guess the voice came with it.
Wow, that is amazing, and it worked. However you did it, I will say that it worked.
Wow, thank you.
And I want to end on that, and I want to tell everybody that Suspect is a really compelling book. It comes out on September 27th, Grand Central Publishing. You can buy it anywhere. And Scott, you also have your website, which is scottturow.com.
Correct. Easy.
Okay.
As long as you remember how to spell my name, and it's right up on the screen next to you. So that shouldn't be hard.
Okay. I urge everyone to buy it. My name again is Bill Myers, the author of the Philadelphia Legal Series. This is Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. Scott, thank you for being on the show.
Bill, thank you for the time and your enthusiasm. I really appreciate it. It's a great interview.